By mid-1966, Hendrix was going it alone, playing the clubs in Greenwich Village. He wasn't making much money, but he was gathering a cult audience. Whispers began to circulate about an extraordinary talent.
I once went to the Cafe Wah in the Village. That's when I first saw Jimi Hendrix. And I went, whoa, this guy is good.
Among the early Hendrix fan club was Chas Chandler, the bass player of the Animals, who in the early 60s had been at the forefront of the British invasion of America. When Chandler discovered Hendrix in New York, the Animals had already broken up. Chas had gone into management and was looking for an artist to cover a Tim Rose folk song called Hey Joe.
Hey Joe, where you going, that gun in your hand?
The night Chandler turned up at the Cafe Wah, he was stunned not only by Hendrix's virtuosity, but also by his choice of song.
Hey Joe, where you going, that gun in your hand?
The first song Jimmy played was Hey Joe, and it was like, you know, I wasn't really conscious of the rest of the act. I saw a master guitar player. I saw the best guitar player I'd ever seen in my life. It was that opportunity, you know, I just sat there and went, phew, let's come to England, you know, let me come bring it to England.
Hendrix would come to London on one condition.
He actually said, if I go to England with you, can you introduce me to Jeff Beck and Eric Clapton? And I said, well, the pals of mine, I've known them 2-3 years, you know. And that was the only question he asked.
Well, when Hendrix landed in England in September 1966, this was ground central for not just music, but for fashion, photography, filmmaking. This was swinging London in its prime, and Jimmy showed up at the single most opportune moment he could have shown up in history.
In a white room with black curtains.
When Hendrix arrived in London, Cream were the biggest act in town. A power trio comprised of blues jamming legends, Eric Clapton, bassist Jack Bruce, and Ginger Baker on drums.
We considered ourselves to be the Cream. We were the guys that could play. Musically, we were streets ahead of any of the others. If we'd have played music written by Humpty Dumpty and Mickey Mouse, it would still have been fantastic because of the musicians playing it.
You said no, we'll secure you at the station.
We were very competitive, you know, at that age, you know, you're like gunslingers or something, you know. I wanted to be the best, most frightening bass player in the world, and I think I was. I think I succeeded in that. I was certainly the loudest. We would take the language of the blues and apply it to modern music. You know, in other words, be very arrogant about it and nick it, but not nick actual songs, but just nick the feeling and the language of the blues, you know, and use that, which is very much what we ended up doing.
What marked this band as the Cream of London was their flair for improvisation, playing solos that never seemed to end.
We simply couldn't stop playing.
I mean, none of us was the band leader, so no one would say, stop, all right, enough. So if one of us took off, let him go. And we just go off that direction or go off in that direction. You know.
We were very much the pioneers of that kind of music. You know, we built that audience from nothing really, and the bands that followed us reaped the benefits of the work that we had done.
Such was Clapton's prowess on the guitar, fans proclaimed his divinity on the streets of London. But the guitar god was soon to be challenged by one of his disciples. Having been in London for just a week, Jimmy went along to a Cream gig and put in an audacious request to jam with Clapton.
Nobody gets up to jam with Cream. Cream is Mount Olympus. Cream is the absolute pinnacle. Ordinary mortals cannot breathe the rarefied air that exists in this hallowed space.
I mean, a very brave person who would do that. As far as I remember, he plugged into my bass amp. He did a version of Killing Floor, and it blew us all away, of course.
Clapton had always loved the song, but always thought it was too difficult. And Hendrix just rages through it and does all his tricks and stunts, the kind of things that people like Little Richard and the Isley Brothers hated him doing. You know, he plays the guitar behind his head, between his legs, with his teeth. Feedback, tremolo arm, dive bombs, the whole works.
He just played his arse off, basically. You know, I mean, the first time I saw Eric, I thought, there's a master guitar player, but Eric was a guitar player. Jimmy was some sort of force of nature.
Eric just stands there and plays, and then we got this guy suddenly, you know, on his knees and playing with his teeth and, you know, screwing the guitar on stage, and I thought, God almighty, what is this?
It was like, wow, that kind of a thing. I know it had a tremendous effect on Eric.
And Eric's hands were like this on the guitar, and it just dropped at his side. And he just stood there looking at Jimmy, and he walked up the stage. And I thought, oh dear, I knew this was going to happen.
And everybody's just going, my God. And it's like, word goes around, this guy got up to jam with Cream and he cut Clapton. He killed God, man, you know.
I ran backstage and Eric was standing trying to light a cigarette, you know. His hands were shaking. He just says, is he really that good?
Chas Chandler was quick to exploit Jimmy's sensational appeal. Stealing the thunder of Cream, he put his own power trio together, flanking Hendrix with two English musicians, Mitch Mitchell on drums and Noel Redding on bass, to create the Jimi Hendrix Experience.